Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the March 26th meeting. I just checking my date since I had a meeting yesterday. March 26th meeting of JCPC, and seeing that we have a quorum, I'm calling the meeting to order. And first making sure, since we're conducting the meeting virtually, that all the members can hear and be heard. So I'll just call out names as I see them on the screen. Sarah,
Here.
Bob,
Present.
Lee,
Here.
Nat,
Yes.
Bridget,
Yes.
and we are missing one Counselor Hollow Lord, but we will proceed. And Melissa, you should just dictate who we hear from first. We have a posting of the projects.
So Dave and Rob are here for for conservation and planning, and they have you want me to share your slides?
Either way, these are pretty short lists, so we could, if everyone's had a chance to look at them, I mean, what does the committee want to do? See the actual proposed project on the screen, or are we ready for people to just talk?
Dave
I
and Rob have prepared a
we
slide
have a very
presentation.
short, 6-slide presentation from conservation, and
Then I
we
think
can
it
move
would
pretty
be,
quickly.
I think it would be useful to do those then, since we have the formatted proposals in our packet. And
Maybe before you share that, Melissa, Kathy, would it be okay to just intro where we're going?
absolutely.
Sure. So thanks everybody for having us. I'm joined by Rob Mora, who is both our building commissioner and our temporary planning director. So thanks to Rob for filling in that regard as well. And he can chime in anywhere in this, but particularly if as we talk about a couple, there's only a few planning requests, but happy to have Rob chime in as necessary. I think the first thing I'd say is, conservation planning, inspection services, DPW, we all work together. There's a lot of collaboration here. I was just on the phone and on emails with DPW staff talking about a whole host of projects. So, we try very, very hard not to be a siloed organization. There is collaboration, help among departments. We frequently work with DPW, with the tree and conservation does with the tree and grounds division, with the engineering division, and likewise Rob and his staff and the planners help us out on a whole host of projects. And many of these projects need permitting. I think I put that in one of my responses. We are now at the point where parking lots and bridges, they need building permits, they need land use permits. So it is not like the 1960s or 70s where you went out and put a couple of telephone poles across a brook and off you go. We have to make sure these structures are safe and in many cases accessible as they possibly can be, depending on their location. So I just wanted to start, I think, with that. With the conservation requests, they're really focused in a couple of different areas. And overall, our goal here, we hear a lot about trails in Amherst, and they are wonderful. We have 140 miles of trails. I was recently corrected by one of my staff because for years we were carrying the number 80 miles. Well, Erin Jock, who's wonderful and an expert at GIS, said, Dave, I really doubt that number. So she went into the GIS and she recalculated. It turns out it's about 140 miles or so of trails. But our goal is to have the best and most accessible trails in Massachusetts. We're a long way from that. We have very nice trails, a lot of them, like many of our facilities, recreation, outdoor facilities, passive recreation facilities, they need work. There's root damage, there's erosion. Many of our bridges literally are from the 1970s or even some from the 1960s. So we're trying to work our way through. I don't like to call it deferred maintenance, but if we want to call it that, that's fine. We're trying to be proactive, work our way, and get some of these wonderful structures over ponds, over streams, rivers, and wetlands back in good order. And every year we knock that off. Conservation has 2 field staff, just so you know, 2 FTEs. So we're more and more trying to pull in outside help. And Rob and his team have been great. Bob Parent, who you've heard a lot about, has been wonderful. But when needed, sometimes it's more efficient to bring in and hire somebody to build that bridge over the Mill River or the Fort River or whatnot. So when we can and when budgets allow, it's more efficient and sometimes less costly to do that. So we try to do that. So why don't we jump into some quick slides and I can run through those really rapidly. So we'll talk about trails and then I'll switch over to Puffer's Pond because those are the main. And Melissa, if you could just forward, that'd be great. So this is a picture of Puffer's Pond, the first picture, and maybe I'll come back to Puffers because we do have some requests, mostly in the out years for Puffers. But, again, over 100 miles of trails. Some of the bridges and boardwalks and such are from, again, the 1960s and 1970s. Some of you are familiar with Larch Hill. This is a wonderful boardwalk. This boardwalk was built, I know because I helped build it. In the 1980s, and it was built almost entirely by the Engineering Honor Society at UMass, and they paid for most of the lumber. The problem is, and it's been there since 1987, 88, and it's sinking into the wetland, as you can see in that lower left-hand corner, and it needs to be replaced. A boardwalk like that, probably in materials alone, I would estimate it might be $50,000. And then that's not even counting the labor. Where we can, as I said, we try to do the labor with town staff, with volunteers. And then we also collaborate with groups like the Kestrel Trust, the Hitchcock Center. And we have a lot of other profits and nonprofits, for-profits and nonprofits who dedicate some of their staff time to helping us. So lots of bridges and boardwalks to replace and repair. Some of them pretty large, like this one, and others very small, like on the right-hand side of this slide. Next slide, please. Again, with a focus on ADA, that first slide showed some accessible trails. We have approximately 5 trails that are either partially or completely, and I don't say the entire trail is meant to be accessible. We still need to improve it to meet those standards. Some of our trails are accessible to a degree, but are not fully accessible. I will say some of the trails that we're currently building at Hickory Ridge will meet most, if not all, of the ADA standards at the state level and the federal level. But again, bridge on the left is solid. You've got your great I-beams there, and our hope is to redeck this bridge and have it open in 25. Again, middle and left, these are bridges that the bones are good, but we just need to redeck them and deal with accessibility and also make them safe so young children don't fall through the railings. Next slide. So examples of projects we did in 24 showing kind of before and after. A lot of the projects we do are trying to remove things like old culverts, culverts that have been filled in, been crushed, eroded, rotted over time. This work also involves really climate resiliency. We need to get a lot of these old culverts that were put in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Most of them are junk at this point, and they create bottlenecks in our rivers and streams, and that's where flooding occurs. So when you can, you replace culverts with elevated boardwalks or bridges and let that water flow through, around, and in some cases over our bridges. So these are some examples of accessible trails that we worked on in 24, and this is kind of where we want to be moving forward. Next slide. More examples of kind of good work we did. These are some of the bridges down at Sweet Alice and the Casey Trail Bridge. In other words, the lower left-hand bridge we worked on with the Kestrel Trust. They bought all of the lumber for that bridge, which was thousands of dollars, and then we came in and helped with labor. And you have a beautiful new bridge that's accessible and also takes people on a wonderful tour of a wetland complex there. Over on the right are examples of simpler bridges, but again, that need maintenance. These were again built during the 60s and 70s, and all the wood rotted. And again, it might take $1,000 to redeck, say, a boardwalk on the lower right. But again, $1,000 is $1,000. So, and that'll last for years if done correctly, with the right spacing and with the right material. Next slide. Ecological restoration, and I put this in because we are asking for a couple of pieces of equipment. The first piece of equipment really helps us. It's a roller. It helps us with the accessible trails. It's a $25,000 item, and we need that to maintain our crushed stone hard packed trails all over town. And it's something that we pretty much need to do maintenance on, a little maintenance every year. Ecological restoration, essentially, we try to keep as many of our open fields in early successional habitat as possible. It's great for birds. It's great for other wildlife. People love it. It's that kind of pastoral setting like the slide on the right. It is good for a lot of other things like dog walking and flying kites and chasing butterflies and all the great yoga and all the other things that people like to do in our conservation areas and our open fields. We keep about 300 acres of early successional habitat open among the 2,400 acres of conservation land that we manage. Next slide. Oh, that one. Oh, okay. That one snuck in. I wasn't,
Want me to go past it?
why don't we hold there for a second? Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't know that one was in there, but that's okay. Why don't I hold on trails? Does anybody have any questions on trails before we talk about respond? Is that a good segue, Kathy?
Yeah, and I have one, or Sarah, go ahead.
Well, we're not yet talking about the specific capital requests, or we are? Or
Puffer's Pond or the trails?
So trails was
for
20
trails.
Trails
Yeah.
was 25,000, correct, Dave?
Well, there's
Yeah,
a bush.
well, I kind of group trails with the small roller, small equipment, and brush mower. Those are the three. I don't know
Right.
if I'm looking at the most updated spreadsheet, but Melissa
Okay.
can
So the
can correct
brush
me if I'm
mower,
wrong.
the brush mower, the small equip, so that's 35, 20, 25, and 25.
Correct. Those were the ones I was kind of grouping in this first little
Okay.
slide deck, giving you kind of a context for why it's needed.
Okay, so questions on the collected set, Bob?
Yeah, the only question I have, Dave, is whether these small equipment, especially the brush mower, the small equipment, whether we have that at DPW or whether we can share some of the costs with DPW. It seems like they need a mower too. You know what I mean? And the question is, what is the DPW versus the conservation department scope, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question and one that comes up almost every year, Bob. And I guess what I would say is, in the ideal world, some of these smaller pieces of equipment could be shared. The challenge is that in our short growing season here in Massachusetts, everybody needs it at the same time. And so when they're doing the work that they do to maintain roads, sidewalks, commons, parks, water, they oversee and maintain our watershed land. We are also doing the exact same thing in conservation. So we don't have a lot of equipment in conservation. It is quite a small grouping, I would say. But the challenge is, and we do share when we can. For instance, we do not have a chipper, but if we need one, a large tree, an 80-foot sugar maple comes down on one of our trails or near a parking lot and we need help, we would call on Alan Snow, and he's often very generous, and we try to repay him when he needs help and his tree crew needs help. We do that. But again, we don't have a chipper because we simply don't think we need it. When we need it, we call on him. But these items, we really feel like we need when we need them. The small equipment is something actually that Rob had recommended, and I think it's a great idea. We need things like, we both have volunteers, students, and we hire a few summer staff, but we need small brush cutters, weed whackers, things like that, small mowers, that we maintain Puffer's Pond and some of the other trailheads with. And they take a real beating every summer. I mean, when you're talking about going along trails, and these small engines, even with the best maintenance, will give out, and they take a real beating every summer. So that's in an attempt to try to replace things like brush cutters, chainsaws, and things of that nature. So I guess the shorter answer is we share when we can, but sometimes there is just not enough equipment to go around.
Understood. Thanks.
Sarah?
Yeah, well, I think I heard part of an answer to my question, which is to what degree are you able to use electric equipment or fuel efficient? You did refer to engines, so it's not 100% battery operated. So obviously a brush hogger isn't going to be electric, but some of the smaller things could be. So
Yeah,
what can you say about?
a couple of comments there. Yes. So every time we purchase any piece of equipment, we are looking for the most, first of all, the toughest equipment, the most economical, and the greenest we possibly can. Honestly, we have not gone electric. We have simply, number one, we don't buy a lot of equipment in conservation. We're not a big purchaser of equipment overall. I mean, trucks and tractors and things of that sort. I think one of our tractors is probably, well, it's got to be 25 to 30 years old. But in short, I think we want to be moving in that direction. Right now, we do not have many. I don't think we have any electric pieces of equipment, in part because of some of the challenges of being out on trails. We're not on the North Common or the Main Common. When you run out of juice and you're a mile into a trail, yes, you can bring extra batteries, but it is very difficult to pack those in. I think it's the direction we want to go, Sarah. I met recently with the DPW staff from Wellesley, Massachusetts, and they have a completely fitted out trailer with all electric chainsaws, brush cutters, line trimmers, and even some small mowers. So that was quite inspiring to meet with them and say, could we get to that point? And again, with a recurring small equipment line like we have in the capital budget now of $20,000 a year, I think that's a direction that we could explore. And Rob has quite a bit of expertise in this area as well. And it's something we should look at is, could we begin to move in that area for some of the small handheld equipment?
Right, the weed whackers.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you use blowers, but
We try
I
not
hope
to use a
not. I
lot
hope
of
not.
we try
But-
not to use a lot of blowers, but because of the noise, the one place we do sometimes use blowers is on accessible trails
right.
to keep sticks and leaves off the trails. So, but I think that's a really great comment. And if we were to receive this funding, we could certainly look in that direction and try to be as green as we can with our purchases July 1 and in future fiscal years.
Thank you.
I have one more, Dave, on the $25,000 for trail improvements, and it's in part motivated by having just reviewed the CPAC request, where you have $130,000 for trails. So does the CPAC money provide enough this year? Could you live without the extra 25? And I also looked that you hadn't necessarily spent out on the earlier CPAC money. I mean, you're planning on spending it. So this year was a large trail improvement bucket, larger than what I've seen in the past from the Community Preservation Act.
130 does not sound.
Did I read the wrong number? Okay. Wait a minute, I have it here. I might have, it says trails and bridges, 130.
Okay. It sounded too high to me, but
Well,
is that what was approved by the council, or was that the original proposal? I thought it was
that's the one
reduced.
that's the one that's in the financial order that
Okay,
finance just
fine.
approved. Yeah.
So regardless, I think what we were trying to do here with this is say that in order to keep up with just the backlog of maintenance replacement, we were trying to get similar to facilities and get in a pattern of trying to fund small amounts like $25,000 every year, regardless. If we, 130,000 sounds like a lot, but that's really probably if we do two significant bridges, two and a half bridges, if you will, if half a bridge is something, that money's probably gone. We're looking at bridge projects. There was a long-standing bridge proposal over the Amethyst Brook, and when our budget for that, our estimates surpassed $100,000, I really said, I don't think we can afford to do that bridge anymore. But some of these bridges, like along the Mill River and the Fort River, they're very well-established trails, and when you go to replace them, they will be $50,000 to $100,000. So I guess, Kathy, to your question, can we live without the $25,000? We certainly can live without it, but it's a hard question to ask a department head when you know that one bridge might be
Right,
50
and
grand.
Dave, I'm mainly asking
Yeah.
it because the CPAC, that one was so much higher than usual, because you've usually been in the 50 range and spending up to it. So I think this year, because of probably
Yeah.
lack of competition of other worthy projects, they
think
they went higher on you.
The other piece of this is we're starting to get in a nice little pattern of permitting, design, and construction. So when you get in that pattern, you kind of get on a roll. Rob and Brad, who is our land manager, Aaron Jock, our whole team is kind of getting in a nice pattern of permitting, design, permitting, and then construction, either doing the construction in-house or actually hiring out for economic and other reasons. So we're kind of in that pattern, and we've gained some momentum, and we've really worked that system pretty well. So my goal was to try to build on that momentum, get some money set aside, and then spend it, and then try to get some of these bigger projects done. So we're back in the maintenance. If we get 25 from capital and we get 45, 50 from CPA, that can get us through some of the smaller projects. But you all have to make the decisions that you need to make with the overall capital plan.
Well, Paul will ultimately make them, but go
Or
on.
your recommendation, if you will.
Sarah.
Yeah, you referred to some nonprofit and some for-profit groups helping out, and maybe they're providing volunteer effort or some materials, I don't know, but do you seek grants? Like maybe for the ADA trails in particular? Are there grant opportunities for?
We do. We seek
Trails,
grants,
yeah.
as you know, Sarah, all the time. For instance, Hickory Ridge is a recent example. We got two grants down there. One was a park grant for the first loop trail that we hope to open in June. And the second grant was a Department of Conservation and Recreation Trails grant. I think that was on the order of 140, 160,000. So again, both of those had an ADA accessible trail component to them. So when we can, we do. There aren't specific grants that I know of that are, for a bridge. It really needs to be a trail. The other challenge for us is, other than Hickory Ridge, I have been trying to fix what we have. And, really, I think in my tenure here, we have not built many new trails in Amherst. We are trying to maintain what we have. Our land acquisition program has since Hickory, I don't believe we've acquired any land. So that is really kind of leveled off. So I think the goal is to maintain and improve what we have and try to bring those up to a higher standard. So that's our goal, and not build new trails. New trails come with permitting and costs, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything else on the conservation? Can we move over?
We can go to the multi-million dollars that you proposed on puffers.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody saw my responses. There were a few questions that were asked at one of the recent JCPC meetings, and I tried to answer those as best I could. But let me quickly summarize buffer spawn. So in this slide, which has some interesting highlights from the past 8 or 9 months here. So what is our approach at buffers? So first and foremost, the approach is safety. We've got to make sure always that the dam that we own, the dike that we control, both those structures are safe. So we were very fortunate recently to get a $250,000 design assessment and design engineering design grant from the state, the Office of Dam Safety in Boston, to do a full assessment of the dam and dike at Puffers. Now, keep in mind, we do engineering assessments of those every 2 years. And in those engineering documents, they identify things that should be done to the dam and dike. This is a much more comprehensive look. This will actually, we're doing full borings at the dike. We will be putting divers in the pond, looking at the face of the dam. You and all of us look at this lovely picture on the left-hand side of this slide in the winter and summer, and it's gorgeous. But the real question is, what does the underwater side of the dam look like? How much sediment is there? And if we needed to, in an emergency, say a storm like we saw in Vermont over the last 2 summers, if we needed to draw down that pond in a hurry, would the emergency release structure, which is up on top of the dam and allows us to control the level of the pond, would that work? And that's something we're not fully confident of 100%. So we're going to put divers in the pond. We're going to check sediment levels, depth. We're going to look at the bathymetry of the pond, that is the depth of the sediments in the entire pond. And then we're going to come up with a plan. That engineering team will come up with a plan. Again, Bob Parent is working with us on this. That engineering team will come up with a design for improvements to the dam and any improvements we need to do to the dike and to the dam. We think a lot of the actual work needs to be done to the dike. We think the dam is, based on those semi-annual reports, is in fairly good shape, but no one has put a diver in there since we haven't looked at the face of the dam since it was drained, which had to be in the 1980s sometime. So the answer is we're using past capital to match the state grant, and then we would come back both to the capital plan as well as to the state when we're ready to do those improvements to the dam and dike. And we don't know those numbers. Those numbers are simply estimates now based on previous engineering studies. And again, I think once by the end of this year, early 26, we will have very solid cost estimates for repairs to the dam and dike.
Thank you. And then people should raise their hands as we go along. I'm just seeing that I had sent in some questions. And there were answers, and one was we did give a grant, the town did, and Dave's answer to do this assessment, and that grant was used to bring in the other 250, so
We leveraged
one
that.
of
That was
the
our local match.
put in some money and then it leveraged other money, which is terrific. So thank you.
Before, I know Sarah has a question, but so that's the dam and dike safety. The bigger, the longer term question is, what does the town want to do with this wonderful resource in North Amherst? And so, we have multiple levels here. We have dam and dike safety. We have water quality. We're starting a more rigorous and robust sampling regime this summer to look at potential upstream sources of contamination for the pond. But the real question is, do we want to dredge the pond? And again, in some of the out years here, we've put some very rough estimates for dredging and beach improvements. And again, we have engaged an engineering firm and landscape architecture firm to look at some of those. Those will be firmed up this year. But again, to dredge, we're easily in the $1 million to $2 million range, we believe. And at some point, the town will need to decide how critical, how important is this resource for the residents and for the region. It is filling in naturally. It is a non-natural pond that is filling in naturally through the flow of the Cushman Brook and sedimentation. I've heard from many families and others that the pond is getting shallower and it's getting a little swampy in certain parts, and that's because it's shallower. We also believe that the water quality issue is unfortunately negatively impacted by that process as well, which is the pond is getting shallower and therefore it's warmer. So bacteria grows faster in warm water. So at some point we will need to face that question in the next 2 to 3 years. Do we want to dredge, and how much will that cost? And associated with dredging is how much do we want to improve the beaches, the access to the pond after we dredge? So we've done some significant work on that, on what the beaches could look like. There are grants out there to improve outdoor passive recreation and access. But again, that's a couple of capital years down the road. So I think I'll stop there. Happy to take questions.
I'm looking for any hands. I guess my question, I mean, you have a beach repair in a second year at 1.5 million, and this is all 27, 28 people are looking at. And what I observed about those years is the capital budget is overspent. So on the internal discussions with big buildings coming online, and we haven't yet seen over in the regional schools, if they take on the roof, what will happen to the regional capital budget. So I'm just wondering how we put these placeholders, but many of them are what is throwing the budget into a deficit in the out years. So I see Bridget's hand up. That's a global question about the set, but go ahead, Bridget, and if you want to add to that so that he can respond to all of us.
Sure. So my question's a lot more specific, and it's just about if anything included in this request I guess the question is dredging the pond something that would help with the situation of the pond being closed so often? Due to, to the contamination or the water, with the coli and whatnot. It seems like, that the pond was closed a good amount this past season, and just wondering about that.
No, it's a great question. Thank you, Bridget. It's, I think the short answer is, we don't know, but it is certainly not going to hurt. It can only help. As I alluded to before, shallow water warms up much more quickly. Bacteria grow more rapidly in shallow, warm water. So the pond depths, I haven't looked at that recently, but, over toward, the cliffs, the depth is probably around 12 feet, maybe as much as 14 feet, but the rest of the pond, a lot of the area is anywhere from 6 to 8 feet deep. And then a lot of it is really 3 or 4 feet deep, and the sediment might be 3 to 4 feet deep in the bottom of the pond, the muck. So it can only help. It is not the cause of what we're seeing with the bacteria, but it may be a causative factor. It may be part of the equation of helping the pond to be healthier. I've had a lot of conversations with our sustainability director, Stephanie Ciccarello, our planning staff. We look at Puffer's Pond as a conservation asset, a recreational asset for the town and the region. But to be honest, one of our biggest stressors here, and you alluded to it, is that we had to close it so many times the past 3 years. And that to me is really challenging, because it's a cooling center on these very hot days for so many families who may not have a backyard pool, or may not be able to afford to go to the Cape or the islands or Maine or whatever to cool off when the temperature rises 90 degrees and above. So we are really looking at it with that sustainability lens and saying we need to solve the E. coli challenge problem, but also make a longer term commitment to make sure this resource is open and accessible to people now and in the future. And even today, I mean, if the water quality was great, I have to admit, as a planner, and I think Rob would agree with me, our staff, planning staff and conservation staff would agree. When you go to those beaches, beaches might be a really generous word. It looks like a 1960s swimming hole, and it's not accessible. and we don't have restrooms there, we spend about $8,000 to $10,000 on porta potties every year. We really, frankly, with the number of people who visit the main beach there, I think we ought to have a restroom that is accessible. That thousands of people visit Puffer's Pond every year. I think the numbers probably rival our public pools. And so we've got a long way to go to make sure that resource is what it should be. And we're looking at it as a cooling center for low and moderate income families who want to go there and enjoy. So
Sarah?
I'm curious about the, I think you call it an emergency release mechanism in case of flooding. So that's not something that's periodically tested? You can't try it to find out if it's working, or is there some risk that it fills up with sediment and it gets destroyed by testing it?
great question, Sarah. I'm kind of glad you asked it. So we do exercise it, and we have exercised it. I've been there with Jason Skeels and our staff when we exercise it. It works quite well. One of our biggest concerns is not will it open, it's will it close. And so that's part of this engineering study and why we're going to put divers in the water. The flow structure, the emergency release is not as old as the dam. I don't have the year off the top of my head, but that was put in, in the last 25 to 30 years. So it's not, ancient like the dam itself. But our main concern is, will it close? Our concern from a regulatory standpoint is we don't want to lose the pond. Residents, DEP would not be happy with us if we couldn't close that. So yes, we do exercise it. We have exercised it, but we worry a little bit. At some point, will we not be able to close it because of sediment buildup or rust or something like that? So that's really the more urgent concern, is making sure we can close it and that it
But when
open.
I'm sorry. Yeah. When you exercise it, are you not opening it and closing it?
We are, but
Okay.
the concern is at some point, without seeing what's underwater,
I
this
see.
is a metal steel structure, without seeing what's underwater, deep underwater and under sediment, we don't know what condition it's in subsurface. We can see all the,
Okay.
the device. It's a wheel. It's something that our town engineer has exercised through the years, but we know we can open it. We
I see.
just don't know sometimes always that it's going to close. So,
Understandably. Thank you.
so
Mm,
again, I appreciate the concern about the out years. I know in past, our finance director kind of put those big numbers in a box. I guess in a box at the bottom of the joint capital planning, the plan itself, the capital plan. I guess my concern is we're kind of getting to that point of, are we going to plan to do this, or are we going to always put it in a box at the bottom? And I know it's, I like all of you know how difficult capital is going to be over the next 10 years, but we're going to need to make a decision on puffers and
Dave's
you know.
reference to a box was a couple years ago. We had things we would do if we only had the money.
Yes,
Very high priority things we would do if we only had the money. So
exactly.
they didn't appear in a column because they threw everything off.
Sean Mangano put them in a box at the bottom of the capital plan. So, and again, I think by the end of this year, early into 26, we will have more information on the pond through this studies and some of the other work we're going to do there than we've had in the last 30 years. So I'm trying to move us toward having all the data we need to make that decision. So I'm just telling you that publicly, that's my goal. I'm not expecting yes, we will dredge in 27 or 28, but I'm saying with some of the previous capital money you've given and some of the grants we've gotten, we will have a very good package to help decision makers in town make that decision, I hope in the winter, early spring of 26. So I'm just putting that out there, that we will have the most information we've had in my career with the town and spanning a little farther back than we've had. So I think we'll be in a good decision-making point.
Bob?
Yeah, Dave, my biggest concern is the E. coli and the other kind of contamination that we've seen. A lot of the sources of that are upstream,
That's what I was going to say.
presumably. And it seems like unless we can solve that problem first, we can't really do a lot of work on the pond because we can't count on it being used. And I'm someone who, when I was a kid, everybody swam in the rivers, they didn't have pools, and then the rivers got too polluted and you couldn't swim in them anymore. So, we have a perfectly good spot that you could swim in, but we can't use, the water quality isn't good enough. So, I mean, it seems like that to me is the highest priority is figuring out what the contamination is, sources are, and how to stop them.
No, I wouldn't disagree. The only thing I would maybe add to that, Bob, is I think we need to do both at the same time. Even if we solve the E. coli problem today, I would still, or had it solved yesterday, I would still be before you asking about the dredging and the beach improvements. I will say that, as I stated earlier, we are going to start a kind of a more robust testing program upstream in the Cushman Brook. I wish it was as simple as finding a point source, but it often isn't. We're doing the same type of thing. We're working with the university and the Fort River Watershed Association on the Fort River. And, we have high E. coli levels in the Fort River, which have influenced swimming at Stanley Street at that swimming hole. And of course, the water quality at Groff Park, where young children wade and swim and recreate. And it took us probably 2.5 to 3 years to really zero in on the source there. So I hope it's going to be easy, but I can't promise it. But we are committed to working upstream. I will say sediments in the pond might play a role in this. Ducks and geese on the pond, dogs defecating upstream and people not picking up their dog waste, farm waste upstream. All of those could be factors. Runoff from the State Street and other streets. So it could be a combination of factors. And if we find a point source like a underperforming septic system, that would be great. That would be one of the easier things to kind of deal with. My fear is it's a number of factors that are kind of diffuse in the watershed. I hope that's not the case, but we're working on it. I'm as committed as you are to kind of get to the bottom of that.
Okay, but it seems that seems to be part of the solution. If we can't
Absolutely.
fix that problem, then we can't really improve the pond itself.
You're right.
Okay.
Sarah,
Well, it just seems that dredging the pond will help solve the problem, not simply by removing contaminated sediments, but by having deeper, cooler water and, more dilution. It's basically a stagnant puddle. I mean, of course it gets, water quality is poor. So
Dilution might be part of the solution.
yeah.
one of the things you see if you go upstream to all the tributaries that come down is they're clogged also. It's not like there's beautiful rushing water coming down into puffers. There's sediment and sludge, so when you said finding the source, I mean, and there's also, I was trying to look at, there's more than one waterway that's feeding into that pond. There are these little branches that come out. I mean, Dave knows this better than I do, but I just walk it a lot and go, well, where's that one coming from? It's seeing that it's also going into the pond, but
no, I appreciate your bringing that to a point here, and it's a good time of year for my staff and I to really kind of refocus on that robust testing this summer to see if we can really get to the bottom of is there one source or multiple sources of that contamination?
Well, it's not helping that we've had so many drought years. I mean, the stream flows are just lower. So,
well, I will say drought is one factor, but the flashy storms we have actually don't work in our favor, because really what that does is it washes out the contaminants in a very rapid manner from the watershed, and they reach the pond, which is essentially a big tub, if you will.
Right.
behind that dam, and water does not move out of it very quickly. So yeah, the flashy storms are not really our friend. They're washing all the contaminants from everything, from yards and farms and roads and et cetera, all into the river at the same time.
And I think everyone knows this used to be, or you might not know, it used to be called Factory Hollow because it was also upstream were a whole lot of mills, paper mills and other, kinds of mills that were used, so I mean, it's got a long history of being able to collect uh, different kinds of sediment, I guess is a way to say
Well,
it.
in closing, that will be part of our assessment. We have done some core samples of the sediments in the pond, and we do know that there are some contaminants in the sediments, deep in the sediments of the pond, that are from industrial mills upstream. There were, I think the research that Meg Gage and other folks are doing up there were 20 something mills, at least, maybe more, along that stretch. So there are some contaminants that we're going to have to decide whether they are safe to be left deep in the sediment layers or whether we need to take those out. So that more to come on that when the time is right.
So I'm conscious of time, I mean, Rob has been sitting here very patiently, but are there any other questions? And we can, if questions occur to people, we could also send them after Dave leaves us through Melissa, but
So we're happy to jump on to the planning for the sake of time.
sure, I think that'd be great.
And again, happy to have Rob chime in. I don't know, do you want to start, Rob, or I'm happy to weigh in first and have you jump on?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Dave. Thank you.
So starting, I think there's really only one request for FY26. And again, this is kind of a reoccurring theme that kind of plays out in facilities conservation and planning, but this has a different focus. But the idea is that we are trying to seek a reoccurring source of funds for basically bringing in experts to help us with a variety of exercises, mainly having to do with zoning, with village center planning, to bring in folks who can help us augment, increase capacity of the planning department and pull together information and public processes having to do with, what are some of the goals we want moving forward for housing, for densification. We have a great example, some of the work that Nate and Rob and other folks did in the planning staff. It was a huge, heavy lift to do the university drive overlay with the planning department, but that's not always possible to kind of garner that much, the number of meetings, the number of hours. I was talking to Nate the other day, and I think it's been in committee off and on for, including the planning board, for about 8 months, but we actually started talking about it 2.5 years ago. So this money is really intended to kind of help us when needed to bring in experts in the field from who have expertise in other communities to help us do those studies, work on zoning, bring us ideas and samples and other information to help us move along goals of the master plan, and including zoning and housing initiatives. And I don't know, Rob, if you want to add anything to that, more specific.
Yeah, and I do want to, you mentioned the UDrive overlay. I just wanted to note that, that may be one of the more simpler, types of zoning amendments we've brought forward where, we were able to do most of it in-house, even though it did take quite a bit of time. Wherever we pivot to next, I definitely think, whether it's graphics or, as Dave mentioned, support through the process, there are going to be studies and modeling and build out scenarios and things that we're just going to need some assistance with if we're going to completely put together a comprehensive proposal or thought to rezoning in certain areas. And just not entirely related, but some good examples of that type of work. We recently hired a consultant to look at the VFW site and prepare some conceptual planning ideas and really help with the public process. And we're doing the same thing with South Amherst School. And I think that, is just an example of where that type of assistance is helpful. As I'm looking at the housing production plan coming to completion this summer and some of the draft work that's being done for the downtown design guidelines, it's really apparent that there's a lot of recommendations in there related to zoning regulation that we have on the books right now. So there certainly is going to be plenty of opportunity to pick and choose and prioritize where we go, and any of those items assistance will likely be needed.
I'm just looking for any questions on this. I know, Sarah, you had for another department question why a study is a capital.
Oh, I asked this of Dave last year, so I already got the answer.
Because this
Or
is-
maybe it was Chris or somebody, but I,
No, because this is an answer of it.
Right.
When you ask for these, well, I'll just do it. It looks like every other year you're asking for this 50. I think it would be useful, certainly it would be useful for some feedback over time on how those were used, because I know you also have periodically have had staff vacancies. So I've seen this as one of the a buffer you have, that you can bring in a person for a project that you might have otherwise had a staff person who could do it, but that staff person's not, you don't have that slot anymore. So is that partly what it's doing? Is, there are peak load times when the staff is just stretched too thin and you've got a targeted use? It's a question of me trying to think of how it's not a full year staff person in terms of amounts. It will buy some modeling, and I know Maureen Pollock at one point was modeling what if we did, and she was doing this elaborate. So I was always wondering where she got that computer package from. I didn't know the town had a computer package like that. So it's like, are we buying software that we don't otherwise have, and then we don't have to own the software because the consultant has it? Just a sense of how the extra consultant time feeds into your staff is what I'm looking
Let me take a stab at that, and then I'm sure Rob might want to add to it. First off, Kathy, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we have staff vacancies, I am not aware that we would use that unspent money for bringing in consultants. That's not generally a practice that the town uses.
Okay.
So frankly, I wish it was, but that is not what our finance approach has been. So and again, to Sarah's question from last year, I wish we had in our operating budget some of this money to actually have, some ability to bring in these experts. And so a lot of times there are, staff have expertise, staff have experience, but as Rob indicated, there are some things that are just, we don't have a lot of software. We don't often have staff who can fully build out or model development, in a village center, something like that. And frankly, you often want somebody who has worked in multiple different communities and is not, in the work that we are doing here, to bring examples from throughout Massachusetts or New England to say, hey, have you thought of trying it this way? And Rob used, there's examples of us bringing in folks to help us with the housing production plan, with the VFW. We got a great firm out of Boston to come in and really, go very deep on that design there and that conceptual design. So I think a lot of it is to build on the staff expertise, but and
Okay.
again, sometimes it's just a workload. There's just not enough time to do this. We are moving every single day. So I don't know, Rob, if you want to be more specific, feel
I
free.
don't need more. That was very
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
I also saw Bridget, your hand was up. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was gonna ask why these costs weren't in the operating budget, and I think Dave spoke to that, so I put my hand back down.
Okay.
We wish they were, but they are not for all departments, and again, I think you've met with a number of departments. So whether it's DPW, whether it's planning, we bring in engineers, we bring in architects, we bring in firms that have both, and those levels of expertise can be hugely helpful.
So,
There was one other, we did in the out years, if you
Yep.
will, 27, 28, 29. You can see we're beginning to at least plant the seed with capital planning that we want to begin to start thinking about and start planning for an update to the master plan. We anticipate this will be a very robust process like it was some years ago, and we are going to need help to move that forward. And so we put in numbers that Rob and Chris Brestrup, as she eases into retirement, provided from consultants out there and from other communities who have done updates to their master plan. And again, these may change a little, with a goal of working on the master plan, in a bit in 28, 29, 30 and beyond. It's going to take us a couple of years to get that done, I'm sure.
and we asked last time about the Civil War tablets because I know what they are, and I know the plan is to move them into the library. But we didn't understand why you needed a budget item for it, because it is part of the library plan, including the installation of them. So it's still here. So
I can,
and then
I-
the parking one, it's moved off to 29. I'm just looking at some of the out years, Dave, purely because the out years don't balance. So trying to understand.
Sure. Why don't I take Civil War tablets and Rob can speak to parking? So my understanding, Kathy, is if all goes well with the Jones Library and it is built, they have designed a room for the Civil War tablets to be in, but nothing else. Their budget does not include display materials. It does not include displaying the actual tablets, and that's a very significant piece of this. So any work to reinforce that room, any educational materials, anything like that is really on the town to fund. Now, if all goes well and the project proceeds, we will be going to CPAC as well to help with that in the fall. And again, a significant amount of that money could come, but to fit out that room will be far more than the 50,000 or so that we've asked for here in capital. So we just had a placeholder there with the idea that if the Jones moves forward, capital could contribute to that. And I don't know, Rob has looked at kind of the structure of that room a little bit more. Would it need reinforcing, Rob? I don't know the details there.
Yes, it would need reinforcing, but so it needs a design first. So we need to understand layout and just how the display will be presented in the space. And it goes from structural to lighting and finishes and ways to support the information and materials that will accompany the displays. So it's all of that design through construction of the space.
And none of that's in the library budget, the project budget?
It's not.
Okay.
And as you know, I think the tablets weigh, some of them, they vary, but I think on the order of 600 pounds.
No, I know,
Yeah.
I know that the designation of the room was because of where the room would be, that it could bear the weight.
Mm.
That was, where are they gonna go? But, so thank you. Sarah,
Does the town own the tablets?
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
So,
they were in storage for an incredibly long time, and
yeah,
then Sarah, I think when you were on CPAC, CPAC paid to have them cleaned,
They were restored.
I think
in
that was even before me. I
Yeah,
remember
before you,
we
but
paid
they
to have
were
gravestones cleaned, but not,
No, but they were
tablets, I believe,
restored to
yeah.
their current glory, yeah.
I
yeah.
believe we did restore them using CPAC and they turned out beautiful. I mean, the restoration job was well done. So the only other thing I think was maybe to speak about downtown parking, and I think that's in 29 or 30, Rob. I don't
So-
know the details of that. I think, do you know any more about that than I do?
Yes, I mean, at this point, we've created the overlay on a parcel owned by the town. We've done a update to the structural capacity of the Boltwood garage with a prior fund that we finished up maybe a year and a half ago. So the thought was, where do we go next? So there were questions about other locations looking at improvements to other areas, and that would be, that would be the next step. Where do we need to look next, knowing that we have this information about the capacity or the capability of the Boatwell Garage, we have this overlay, and then we have obviously identified all these other parking areas that could see improvements or be utilized differently. And that's
Do you
That's
know
what I
whether
think,
there's been any approach to Amherst College to use the alumni lot that's behind Boltwood Inn, which would be out of sight of buildings, in terms of building up but convenient for everyone in town? You may not know whether it's been on the list. I think it was at one point on a list.
Paul and I have spoken to them through the years, and that idea, actually, I think that idea predates Paul. I think it goes back to Larry Schaefer. But we have spoken to Amherst College about that and kind of planted that seed that we'd be very interested in working with them. I think it all kind of depends on their master plan, for their comprehensive plan for the college and what they see for that area. But it definitely comes up, Kathy, in some of our meetings. Is they're pretty generous with it now informally for us, but could we formalize that in some way? And I think that's the direction, if they were agreeable, we would like to go.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other
Conservation planning?
questions? I just started looking at the out years on some of these, and Puffers was the big one that jumps out at you. These others are in the smallish range.
Mhm. As I said, I think the message, if I could, would be, my goal is to try to provide you and the council, the Conservation Commission, the town, with as much information as possible by the end of this year, early 26, so that we have a body of knowledge about Puffers Pond infrastructure that we haven't had. And so we'll have dam, dike, dredging, sediment, beaches, images, conceptual images of what the beaches could be like. We already have those, actually. And then we have to go for the dam and dike repair grants. We will do that. And to Bob's point, simultaneously trying to address the water quality issue is a given. It's just a given. So I don't mean to say that we're
Yeah.
going to be focused on all of these other things and not water quality, but I want to give the town a comprehensive package, and that'll help with decision making, and that'll hone in on what is that real number in 27, 28, 29. What's a real number for dredging and beach improvements?
It makes sense. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. And I also want to welcome Hala. I didn't call out your name when you came in to make sure you can hear us, but I did see you joined us. Well, I think you joined us.
Thank you. Yes, I did, and I can hear you.
Okay, yes, I can hear you.
If,
So
if
I
the
think
committee
we-
has any other questions, in the days and weeks ahead, certainly
No,
Rob
I
and
think-
I.
I think that was very helpful, and thanks for preparing the charts for us and for spending the time with us.
Appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So, unless you want to stay for the rest of this, you may leave.
I may listen in, but thank you all.
So, today, Melissa has been adding things to the packet. It's the last time we had vehicles and buildings added. I think the only other one we might be missing, unless it was added today and I didn't double check, is there was an update on the 10-year debt schedule in terms of debt we already know about, and she was revising that. And it doesn't necessarily inform any decision we need to make, but it does give a picture of how tight these out years become when the larger building projects come on. And Bridget and Sarah, Melissa can correct me, there was trying to look at what the regional might be coming in on, what we put into this budget for regional we don't have to make a decision about it, but we put what's been voted in the region in. And to the extent there's a, what does the region look like for 27, 28, 29, and 30? You know, when and
Right.
if the roof is in, you know, Melissa, I can't remember what you said. Did you grab the
So
numbers? Yeah.
I updated, not in your, your spreadsheet there, but I have updated in 3 other places that I have to keep track of the debt numbers, the region's debt amount. And so I had gotten from Jill several months ago, Jill being the treasurer for the regional school district, their estimates, and those amounts were updated a while back. And I think that when the region voted their actual debt for fiscal 26, it went up slightly. I think it went from like 412 to 485. It wasn't a significant increase. I mean, percent wise, I guess it was, but it compared to the other debt that we have relative to the elementary school and town debt, it, I just made that small change, and so I'll have to update the actual amount. And I can follow up with Jill to see if her out years have changed because of that, or if it was just this year, and her estimates are close in the out years. But I can update the summary plan with her debt, and I have started to work on the 10-year debt stuff, and I did put in the new number for fiscal 26 for the debt, but I have not completed that because Jen and I are still working on some numbers, and we're meeting next week with our debt advisor or fiscal advisor for borrowing for the municipality to sort of lay out some actual debt that we will issue in May. So I'll have some better estimates on those numbers in May, in the next couple of weeks. And so I've sort of hesitated to put anything up and then have it change. And then ultimately, by the time we vote all this, our numbers won't be accurate anymore, but I just want them to be as close as I can get them since we're making those decisions right now.
Okay, so I see both Sarah and Bridget have their hands up because there's one other, I just want to make one other remark and then go to you. At the council meeting on Monday night, we voted to decrease the amount of capital available for this year, and that from 10.5 to 10%. So that takes about 300.
So Kathy, I don't think you actually voted that. You voted to change that in the amendment, and the amendment hasn't been submitted yet. So
Okay. So
I understand that there's the notion, but
there was a vote in the amendment, so it's
Yeah.
we potentially have
Right.
$300,000 less than what we've been
For
looking
FY
at.
26?
For FY 26. It's
FY26.
just FY 26. It's, so we potentially have that, and I have no idea when that will be confirmed. And it might not be confirmed before we finish what we're doing. So we work with the 10.5,
Okay.
and then Paul in the final capital improvement plan that goes to the council, either is adjusted or not, but that's just something to be thinking about. That's about a $300,000 less than what we've been looking at. So both Sarah and Bridget, you had your hands up. I just wanted to give that piece of information.
Go ahead,
Sarah,
Bridget.
go
I don't know what
ahead.
happened to my hand.
Bridget,
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure how much this committee knows or not, but our facilities director spoke last night at the regional meeting. And he said, that the folks from MSBA had been in, and they'd looked at all the roof and the area over the pool and the school, qualify for replacement under their grant. We're in a certain phase of it. Maybe Sarah can tell the exact details, but that's looking very positive. The auditorium section wasn't covered in that, and yeah, that's all. So hopefully, I don't know what numbers the projections are based off of, but hopefully the number that we have to put in for that is smaller than what's projected.
That would be great.
Um,
And I just
can I-
mentioned, I just mentioned that as an unknown.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sarah,
I just wanted to say the regional committee has spent zero time looking at out years and not even very much time really looking at next year. That's all our attention. It really is on the operating budget. But I do recall some really horrendous looking numbers for years ahead. And, you know, I think people just kind of been shoving things that way. So I have no idea whether any of that's accurate or still needed, or, you know, what the assumptions are. One reason I'd sure love to get the operating budget settled is that, yeah, there's, among many, is that there's, you know, I do think it would be good for us to spend a little more time looking at the long-range capital.
yeah, and Sarah, what I remember is that table that you're talking about. There was
Yeah.
one of the four-town meetings that said when they put roof repair in, it was a very big number,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and I know it wasn't even we know this is the
Yeah.
number, so Nat, and so I didn't mean to segue into regional, which we don't know, but, you know, I want to stay focused on FY26 and what we think about the various projects. So Nat,
Right, so on that point, FY26, I just want to make sure I understand your point about the 10.5 to 10% in the context of 26. And so am I correct? Sorry for possibly a newbie question here, but as I understand Melissa's funding summary, so at the bottom for FY26, there's a over under kind of under available funding of 485,000. So are we saying that we're adding potentially 300,000 to that? So it's more like
Correct.
785 that we're.
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
You know, and it's that cash line, if the cash line goes down, you know, that the cash line after we pay for debt, the potential line, the 5.5 million for new projects, if that goes down and we still have the same project list, you're absolutely right, then the overage goes up.
Right.
You know,
So I
as long
do-
as we have all the projects on the proposed list.
Yeah,
And
so I do want to say that as bad as it is being over by the almost 500,000, it was like 480 something, I can't remember now. When we were talking with Guilford, we reduced one of his projects by $240,000. So the over under there is around 230 or 260 right now, if you back that out. And so I can update those, and I know that's something that we're going to talk about in a minute, Kathy, is you know, update those summary numbers with that one change that Guilford had said that a project had been reduced, and when I had the spreadsheet up at that time. And then as you decide, you know, that maybe some projects get pushed or something like that, that number will get better.
you know, so for example, if based on what he told us, I'll just stick with that one.
Mhm.
We thought we're not ready to spend that money and turn that money over, then his lowest number would go to zero and on some level wipe out the deficit we're looking at, because it was a
Mm.
$500,000 ask.
Mhm.
So I have a few others, if anyone else wants to jump in, but I have had a few others I flagged as we went along that I'm not sure I would support. I don't think.
Can I ask a process, like a higher level question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
sure.
Kathy. Yeah, so we're going to end up with a list of recommendations, and after we deliver that report, you're saying there might be less money available than we thought. So I don't remember what was done last year. Should we flag any projects as cut these first if the money is short? Or do we just leave that to the town manager?
You know, we've never had this dilemma before, but I think that would be a smart decision. You know, if the money available should go down, these would be our first level choices to take out, either take out altogether or move to the next year, you know, either way. The other thing we can do, and we were asked to do, in general, if we move something off the list or reduce it, we were asked by the Finance Committee to indicate, should there be surplus funds when we close out the current year in the fall, what would be the top priority to put more money into, you know, with these 2 or 3 things. So we can also, I think we can and should write that in this report. So one thing I heard when Shannon was here on the 6th grade move, that she asked for 350, but she'd feel a lot more comfortable with 500. So that was one of the ones I flagged as a high priority for extra money if extra money becomes available. So we can do both, Sarah. You know, I'm saying in a direction of, should you need another place to look, this would be where we would suggest moving first. We've just never had to do that before. The task was much more what Nat just identified. Can we wipe out the deficit? And so how might we do that rather than going beyond what we're looking at? So we have, it's 5:18, and let me just double check. There are 2 people in the public, so I do want to reserve some time for public comments, but I thought we could begin with anyone who wants to step in with are we happy with most of the projects except for, you know, a couple that we're not sure that they deserve to be on as higher priority lists, given that funding is tight. And in that context, Melissa early on said she only flagged one for debt. That was the $1 million on the communication equipment. And if she could have, she would have made it cash. So we could also think of, you know, can we convert that? You know, we don't have to say we're just getting to 0. We can also say any project we question, we can question. You know, we don't have to just balance this year's budget. So in any order that anyone has, and I'm willing to start if no one else has any targets, but Nat.
Sure. I was looking at kind of the larger amounts. So the ones that so first in the information technology, the disaster recovery, we had 180,000 there. And I think in the discussion that day, we thought that there was a grant that was available. So we most likely would not need that 180,000.
Yeah, so I mean, I just know from my conversation with Sean is that he feels fairly confident that he will be eligible for some well, he's going to apply, but the application to apply for that isn't open yet. So we won't know before this process, but he did want to sort of, and into any amount, I'm not sure when he said, I can ask him when he says when the application will be known, but, you know, that's the full cost of the project. And he is, you know, he's feeling fairly confident that he'll, get the full amount, but sometimes I'm familiar with that particular grant. Sometimes a lot of people get the award and then you only get 75% of the project or you get 50% of the project compared to the competitors, you know, and how much money is available. So similar to this process, he's in competition with some capital money from the state for these kind of projects. And, you know, if there's a lot of requests for the similar things, they may all get awarded and applied, you know, fairly among the communities. So maybe that's one that you star because he feels fairly confident that it will go away, but it is something that I think he feels he needs. But, you know, the hope is that he doesn't have to ask for it at all, but he didn't want to not put it out there and then not get the award and then, you know, be out of luck.
Right. And so the other kind of larger amount that I flagged, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the the Public Works, the Southeast Street intersection design that was requested as $500,000. I think we were told that that could be reduced to 260.
Yep, and I did reduce that kind of in line, and that's what I talked about earlier about how that the bottom line deficit was slightly less now, because I just, when he said it could go to 260, I just changed it right there on the
Right.
spot.
And then
But just, I would say, let's stick on that one because I wasn't sure, and this is
This
my,
one here, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So my concern is whether we're really ready for the grant at all. And when I pressed him on could he go lower, he said, no, this is his bottom line.
Mhm.
And if we do something simpler, in the next year than what he was talking about, because we haven't really decided what we want to do. So you could spend a lot of money designing different options. So my question was also, Nat, should it go to zero? You know, or
Or
should
do
we
you think it should go, rather than go to zero, maybe go out to next year if you're not
go
decided
out-
on what
go
to
out the
design?
next year, and then maybe Bob, you're on TSO, but maybe it could also be flagged as if there's surplus funds and we're ready, then fund it, but don't fund it at this point because if we fund it, it will get spent is another way I would say that these kinds of studies, you can eat up the money really quickly with a design that people might not want. And I think we should be avoiding that. And I also thought the 6 million out year was a guess and we would never go there. So hopefully we won't, when you look at the next line out on the same one, Nat, it's 6 million.
right.
And I don't think we're going anywhere toward a $6 million change. And there is some grant money, or there was. So that was just my, and Bob, I don't know whether you want to weigh on this, moving it to an out year in
think-
the next year.
I'm comfortable with moving it. I think, you know, we still are, it's not clear in my mind that we really know what we want to ask of Guilford, to be honest with you. And so until TSO and the council gets a better direction, you know, in place, I don't see how we can spend this money. But the other thing is the roadside mower, I have a note in here that there was 250 in FY27 and he wanted to move it up into FY26. Is that correct, Melissa? Or
I think the roadside mower was asked for in 26 and I moved it out
so
to
you moved it.
27 because it was kind of in line with what we sort of didn't allow a lot of vehicles. So because it was that expensive, I called it a vehicle and
Yeah.
I moved it out.
Okay,
And that was like, that was me, you know,
fair enough.
I just
mean,
did it. And so I wanted to give him the opportunity to say that wasn't, that's not what was requested.
So Bob, were you thinking of bringing that one back on to FY26?
I wasn't thinking of doing it. It's just that I recall Guilford saying he wanted it for FY26.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did. And
He needed it
Yeah.
sooner rather than later.
And I'm not even seeing, I'm just by eyes, or there's the dump sander, the pickup, he's got a lot for next year.
Well, yeah, I
Echo.
mean, he's got a lot. He's got 6 million there. Which he-
Sorry.
so do you want me to change these things sort of as we talk about them? I mean, do we
It
want to
would-
talk about
I think
moving
that-
South Street or?
Yeah, if everyone would agree, that would be my recommendation to move Southeast Street.
And should we, you know, maybe compromise a little bit and move it out a year and make it 300, just because by next year it'll say it costs more. So you start it at 5, we'll bring it. I'm just trying to be, you know.
I would keep it at 260.
Okay.
You know, because I've seen him do some of these studies for less money than that, you know, and if he's doing something simple, he doesn't even need that much, you know,
Mhm.
I don't think he needs that much, to
But-
be honest with you, but
Could I
I'm
just
seeing Nat, Sarah, and Bridget. If we're all on the same topic, everyone should weigh in. Yeah. Nat,
Oh,
then Sarah, and
no,
Bridget.
I'm nothing more to add on that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that I thought I heard Guilford say that, okay, if you put it, reduce it to 260, I want the 140 the next year. But maybe I only imagined that or I misunderstood. So,
I'd have
Well,
to go back to the meeting. I don't
Okay, well,
remember.
what he said is that at 500, some of the construction and serious design work could be done.
Yes.
First, he was just going to build, I won't say a plastic model, a model of the whole area and do some surveying, but some more serious work could be done with the others to start to get closer to construction. So he wasn't giving up on the design side of it and the modeling with 260. He was just not going as far as he could go.
right.
If you gave him more
But
money.
I thought he was willing to split them. So if we move them both 1 year.
Right, and that's what's the construction, is it a $6 million construction cost or is it a 500,000 construction cost? What's a roundabout cost if we only have one? So I just, yeah, I'm comfortable, I didn't think he gave us a very good answer on why 260 was as low as he could go, and nor what he would do with the extra money. And I'm just worried that he just gave us a design with 3 roundabouts, 4 roundabouts with a lot of detail in them that caught everyone by surprise because there was no discussion before that went into that. Literally no discussion. So it just arrived with a very long report that someone paid for. I mean, meaning the town. It wasn't.
We paid for it.
Some bucket paid for it in the DPW land. So I worry about so my recommendation would be to shift it and leave it at 260, and next year have a justification for the amount that's needed. And if it has to be higher, great.
I agree.
Okay.
That would be mine. Bridget,
So I agree with everyone about the southeast intersection. I guess that's the main thing that I was gonna say. And then the second thing, I guess, is just a process question. I like Nat's approach of going for the big things first. And so when we're ready for that, I have more to say.
yeah, and I have another big one too. So if we're ready for this one, I think we've done 2 things, Melissa. And we'll write this up if Paul doesn't agree with us, he can see you'll know what we've done. But the 6 million would shift then too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what number we need for what number, but that next number that he's got for FY27 goes to something smaller. Just in terms of your out years and trying to.
Right. So what do you want me to put in there?
I don't know, maybe ask him for, what's his best guess now that we've
Okay.
pared down from, what's his best guess now that we know we're not at 4 roundabouts. I guess that's the only thing I think we know for sure. But just a good number, and if he says 6 is it, there's nothing you can do about it.
Mhm.
So Bridget, next big one.
Okay, so the next big one I thought was facilities. They still had 500,000, somebody said, from unspent from last year. And then the request seemed like it doubled, and 1 million just felt very high for something so undefined. So I felt like we could reduce there. And I have one other big one. I don't know if we want to go one at a time or not.
Let's do one at a time, because
Okay.
when they just all I can't remember which, at a follow-up meeting, they said they gave us the town hall slate roof was the target, and it could easily absorb all the money they've got, even if they went to CPAC. That was the answer to why they needed, it's not, so you're right, it's 1 million and they already had 500, so it's 1.5 million is what they've got. I didn't know whether we're really ready to do that or not. And they indicated that they could approach CPAC for another part of it, that wouldn't even be enough money to do it, was what they came back to us for on what their priority was. I think Nat asked them, could you give us some sense of what your top priorities were if you're asking for $1 million? And the answer was town hall's roof was what I heard when they came back.
And can I
Yeah.
just say that both Jeremiah and Rob's office are leaking from the roof. There are buckets in their office. So you could see why maybe that's a priority for them. So it's a real concern. So I just want to say that out loud. And I think they provided, and it's in it's in an older packet, but I can forward it to the committee if you like. They did a priorities list that include town hall as the roof, but I think it's close to $10 million in repairs that they, you know, if somehow the roof couldn't get done for whatever reason, they would shift the money to these other high priority projects.
They did give us that. I think it made it into the packet, but they definitely showed it. And that's
Well,
what
right, but it made it into the packet like after the fact, so it may not have been things that people were looking at, so I can forward it again.
And I had a question on some of them, like the North Amherst School roof. You know, there are a few of them that, you know, I'm not sure I would rank it that high, but yes, they did give us a list and it added up to 10 million.
Mhm.
So any reaction to Bridget's thought? And Bridget, I didn't know whether you were thinking of take it down like to 700,000 or to take, you know, something less than $1 million.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking 500 because that was the request last year as well, and it seems like, you know, that they still hadn't spent that part, so then, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
Okay. Nat and then Lee.
Yes, I think I know where Bridget's coming from because when we first got that request, I was sort of unsure what it was really all about. But then when I saw the follow-up memo and saw all the buildings and realized there's a huge amount of work that's required and $1 million won't even get that far. So in my mind, that doesn't seem like such a big amount in the context of what's required. And especially as Melissa said, if things are actually, you know, leaking and so forth. So I was not as troubled by that 1 million after seeing the follow-up memo and all the buildings and the priorities that they have.
Lee?
Well, the only thing I want to add to what Nat has said, because I vividly remember that meeting, is every time you start and stop, you incur costs. So if you have a big project that you know you need to do, it's economically responsible to understand that it's a big project and organize it in that way.
Sarah?
Say two things. First of all, they should do the roof all at once and borrow for it. I would also say that the town hall, at least, and maybe not any of the other town buildings that need work, can apply for CPA funds. And perhaps are already planning to do that. And of course, it has to be the exterior, you know, their requirements for CPA work that could certainly contribute to the roof. So, I mean, as someone already said, it isn't enough to do all the roof and it's a waste of money, not a waste. It's certainly inefficient to do part of the roof. So why don't you forget about the roof? Here's $750,000 or something to work on all the other buildings and just propose the roof separately as a single project.
No, and sir, if their estimate is it's over $2 million for the town hall roof, they have to start talking soon to CPAC on, you know, is there $1 million of that at CPAC, or, you know, what's in the what is in the realm of possibility, right?
Right.
But, you know, you don't have a good idea. So, but the other thing you just said is if we put this, if we keep this, should it be borrowing rather than cash? I think is what you were asking.
No, I was saying if you do the whole roof and borrow for that, because that's like $2 million or
Yeah,
at
so
least
just go-
it's more than $1 million. But so take like out of this $1 million that they're asking for, take out what might be roof money because that's not the way to repair the roof, right? It doesn't make sense to do. So defer the roof and have a lesser amount of money for the other building repairs.
Especially since he didn't this year ask for, he's doing a combination of the everything else, that's, you know, pointing up bricks, fixing an interior lighting
Right,
system.
but $750,000, that's taking $250 off our total. You can do a lot of work other than on the town hall roof.
So
And
service, so let me just feedback what I think you said. This isn't enough to do the town hall roof. So using that as the rationale for the $1 million doesn't make sense. You know, it would need to be more and borrow it, but is $750 enough with the 500 they already have that they haven't spent to do a lot of the work they know they need to get done, and maybe do enough planning to get bids and know what they need to do with the town hall roof so they get a good sense of what the price is on it. You know, have someone come in and do the is that where you were going? Is don't
Yeah,
give this.
yeah.
It's not enough for town hall roof, so
It shouldn't be spent on any repairs to the town roof because it's not enough and it's inefficient. So, you know, maybe there's some planning money, but I mean, anyway, yes, you basically got it.
okay.
So
And just let me call on Bob, and then, you know, I'm sure we're making Melissa really uncomfortable with
She's
our,
itching to say
our
something.
juggling with large leaking roof projects.
that's
here.
the only question I have is what is, you know, how dire is the roof? I mean, do we have to replace it right away? Or can we wait? I don't know. And you know, maybe we need to go circle back to the facilities folks and get a read on that. It would be good to know what we can get from CPAC before we commit to some amount for this. You know, it would be very helpful to have as someone suggested, I think Sarah, you know, get a good estimate of the actual work and then see how much of this we can cover with CPA money versus cash capital or even borrowing. So, and CPA may borrow that money too. So
Bob, I believe they said they have reports on each of the buildings they looked at. So maybe what would be helpful is us to actually get the report for town hall. I mean, I know I shouldn't use our farmhouse with a slate roof as an example, but we had a slate guy come and he flew drones around and he fixed every single slate that needed to be fixed, and we no longer see daylight through the roof. It was fixed, but he said most of the roof is in pretty good shape. Here's what you need to do. So Jeremiah seemed to say the whole roof needs to be replaced, but we haven't seen a report to
Yeah.
understand that. Yeah.
what I heard was they had to put something under the slate, so they had to take it all off, put it on, you know, put on something, a barrier of some sort, and then put it back. And so when they take it down, they'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
able to reuse some of the slates.
Yeah. But that's tricky. So
That's what I heard.
Lee's hand is up as don't do part of the, get ready to do all the work if you're going to do some of the work. So
Okay.
Lee.
Yes,
and
I'm going to be
Bridget.
brief because I'm not sure that this is really relevant, but listening to all the conversations and seeing where the national situation is and where the town situation is budget-wise, might the town or the entities want to think more about creating independent 401c3s to be friends of various entities to support particular projects that the town, the state, the nation does not want to support.
Okay, but that does take us
Friends
on
of,
a
friends
different.
of slate roofs.
Indeed,
Friends
Yeah.
of Town Hall.
Friends of Town Hall.
Well, there was a big brouhaha when we repaired Town Hall rather than built a new building because it was expensive. So Bridget,
Yeah, so I would say, I know Kathy, you said your idea was from your own house, but we had our facilities guy talk about the middle school roof last night, and he said that was exactly the strategy that they were using. They waited for the thaw, and now they went up and replaced tiles that stopped it from leaking on children's heads and having the buckets, which you know is the situation at the middle school as well. And that when the building folks were out who came and toured the building, the MSBA specialists, they said that that was the best practice in the meantime while we're waiting to replace the roof. And I guess the second thing that I'd want to say on it is like, sadly, like it's not just the middle school and Town Hall that have the same leaking roof problem. I know it's a thing at DPW and there's black mold and there's, we closed the building due to asbestos. Wildwood isn't still a thing, but maybe there's a need for some sort of rank order or some fair process around how those things get done as opposed to us just being like, yes, let's pitch in for the roof. And I do feel really bad for them having the bucket, but like this sadly is an Amherstown building situation. And the very last thing on facilities I would say is like, there were a fair amount of buildings on that list that like, I'm wondering why we're doing upkeep or what we're doing, or could we be selling them or other things? And like, it was a long list of buildings, but we don't use every one of them. So, I don't know. I think that's a side point. I'm not sure that's actually relevant, but just came to my mind.
no, my sense is they had a rare part of consultant money that could do an in-dive look, and they did all the buildings. But yes, would you list all those buildings as at a crisis level of being a top priority? We didn't, and we don't have time to have that kind of discussion. The council should. So
Kath, can I
think-
just make one more comment about this? So I do want to remind the committee, and of course you can, so one, what do you want me to do with the number? But two, I want to remind the committee that this specifically was vague and didn't have a project attached to it. And the only reason that they had a project attached to it is because the committee asked for that.
Right.
And so I think that you're stuck on the roof because that's like a priority, but they had a priority method that they wanted to do. And they did ask, we asked for a big number because there are a lot of priorities, and their priorities were to address emergencies and then focus on the envelope of a building. So, basically everything from roofs, windows, pointing, and the outside to create efficiencies so that the buildings are sealed better and therefore air and energy efficient. And then the next phase was to go into heating, cooling, wiring, those kind of things. And that was their idea, is that that anytime that you sort of say, this is for the roof, then if something else happens, like the HVAC system breaks, you don't have the money to pivot to that issue. I'm just making up stuff here. I didn't read the report. So I'm just, kind of creating scenarios. And then the other thing is that when you go to do a roof, you're going to be up there near the soffits, and you're going to see that the window that nobody sees, that it's at the top, that needs to be fixed, or there's repointing that needs to be done on the outside of the building. And so while we're concentrating on the roof because that is a priority, and when they gave you their list of priorities, it was at the top of that. There are other major projects that would be in the $1 million range. Like there's some issues with the back parking lot here at Town Hall that needs to be redone, and the back wall of that supporting wall that's holding the parking lot away from the building next to us had to be emergency fixed a few months ago. And so they've talked about redoing that whole landscape, which then brings in the ADA issues of the entrance to the side of the building, which was compliant at one time when they last redid it, but is not compliant today. So I just want to remind people that this million could be used in many ways, and they just want the flexibility to address the most urgent need. And the reason the roof came up was that was what they were thinking. I know that the back parking lot and the roof are the two major concerns that they were hoping to focus on first. But
I do, I recognize that, Melissa, in terms of you talked about the big bundle rather than the little bundle. Last year he had
Right.
a little bundle for roof, and he had something specific for North Amherst Fire Station and a bunch of other pieces. So now he's trying to bundle up, but his bundle got bigger than the total ask last year. So it was sort of a startling going from lots of small pieces. So I guess I see both Lee and Nat, and it's like, what comfort level? We can certainly write up a long paragraph about this, no matter what we do, that there wasn't enough specificity. And yes, they came back and saying, oh, town hall roof, because that'll take all of the money. And so surely, so the question is, do we want to reduce it at all or leave it with a long discussion about it? I guess that's where I think we're hearing on the long discussion. There was the Sarah version of it where, it could be used for a lot of other things. Maybe we're not ready for the town hall roof, and go do some more research on getting CPAC money for this. And as Melissa said, it's got other pieces. So there's Lee's hands and Nat's hand up, and it's 5:49. So I have one other project I want to just mention, and we don't have to talk about it today, but you can talk about it next week. So Lee and then Nat. You're muted.
You're on mute.
I defer to Nat always.
Nat.
Pressure is on me then. So I think, so if we had $250,000 kind of on the table related to that roof or other work, I just want to propose an alternative, which is also a fairly large number, $200,000, which was requested for part of the lease for the electric school buses. And as I understood that proposal, we had a choice of paying $200,000 up front and a smaller annual lease payment. And I don't think that we save enough money to justify that $200,000 upfront lease payment. In particular, when it changes that $200,000 from a kind of an annual budget item to a capital item. And moreover, because if this bus is also going to be used by the regional school, it seems like there's an allocation issue there as well. So I would, what I know now, what I understand about this, I would favor paying the 10-year lease at a higher amount and not having that $200,000 in the current capital budget.
So I just, that's getting us into a new topic, and there is such pressure to do leasing this way, Nat, because the leasing, we can't afford to buy them. And this spreads it in a way that really helps the school. So I think that is what it may be, not dollar-wise, a dollar-to-dollar match in terms of doing it one way versus the other, but it's also a service contract we're buying with this. They're going to maintain the fleet, they're going to do the charge station upkeeps. So it was a lease that was getting us a lot, as opposed to putting it back on an operating budget. And
maybe I misunderstood. I thought that we were going to lease it either way for 10 years. The only question was whether we have lower lease payments and a higher upfront or not.
Yeah, so Sarah, you can jump in on this
As
one.
I recall, the 200,000 is not buying a bus, or
Right.
it's installing the charging infrastructure, right? So yes,
it's actually both. So this particular company installs electrical infrastructure at the parking lot for the school buses. And these are all busing equipment is owned by the Amherst Public Schools versus the region schools, and they have an agreement where
Right.
they charge each other to and from for those kind of things. Like they're all stored at the region, but they're owned by the Amherst school, and then when they use them, they bill each other. There's a billing offset. And so this leasing company that we've been working with, they build out an infrastructure to charge. We own one electric bus. They're going to lease 3 more. And they build out an infrastructure for charging for those 4 stations, and then enough underground infrastructure that they could add charging stations should they contract for more busing to expand the fleet if necessary. And there's a service contract, just like if you lease your car, you're not responsible. So the only repairs that they would have to pay for are the tires. And apparently this is a big deal because the
Heavy. It's heavy.
the repairs for an electric bus have been quite costly, and I've heard that from other fleets here in town where the repair on electrical vehicles is different and more expensive than, say, a traditional gas vehicle. And so they really like that model, and this company is offering something that sort of builds both at the same time. And so they're leasing both the infrastructure and the bus from the same company and getting a maintenance package on both of those things.
I'm seeing
Yep.
both Nat's hand up and Bridget's hand, and it is almost 6 o'clock. So I suggest that this conversation on this particular one get continued next week. I think there's actually a strong argument, Nat, for keeping this the way it's set up, and I think just people should articulate it better so we can write about it. And the one I wanted to flag, and I won't be here to discuss it, so I'll just send my notes in to Sarah, is the 500,000 for bangs. I don't think we need to do that. The bangs just got 2.8 million to do all the structural things that were important. This does some additional, I'll call them amenities, on some additional pieces. There is the potential that some of them, when they bid out the contract, may be taken care of. And when they talked about the boiler and the design for boiler and said it's about 60,000, Stephanie told us she can do that under her sustainability grant. So at first I thought of lowering it to 60 to 80, which the number we got for designing the boiler. But we were told 3 months ago, that there's years left on this boiler, which is the reason they didn't include it. And I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about what, Bob, December or January. This was
January, yeah.
This was February. This wasn't yesterday. And so I think this is both too high a number and not on the roof is leaking, the wall is falling down, people can't breathe. We're doing air, we're doing all the big things. So that was one I was just going to remove. And if it needed to get lowered to 60, but then Stephanie said she could put it under her budget and that she was planning to, Melissa, when I asked her about that design. So I just
do we want to have consensus? And
I don't know whether anyone else has a view about that. That was one that was my spiel on that one. Okay, Sarah's got a thumbs up on it.
I agree.
So I suggest you continue doing this next week. The notes on it have flagged several, and if anyone else wants to do anything, and then Sarah can collect all of those, and Melissa is changing the spreadsheet as we move along so we can see what we've done.
Well, we should have just solved the problem, taking 500,000.
Well, we certainly solved the
500K
problem.
would solve the
We might have solved Melissa's not wanting to have the 1 million be borrowing, so that she could do it all out of cash to not, so there is that interaction. And we have 4 minutes left. So is it all right for people? I see whether we have participants in the audience that would like to make a comment, and we're down to, we outlive them. We're down to one person. So we're open for public comments of our one attendee would like to raise a hand. The hand did not go up. So I won't be here next week. I'm really, it's actually impossible for me to be here even by Zoom because of where I'm going to be. But I started what I don't think everyone heard. I started working on the report just in terms of a shell structure. That I will send to Sarah with FY26 put in the list of residents. So we have to talk next week. It would be good if you talked about which, if any, of the resident proposals you want to flag in some way. And Melissa, we haven't heard back from Guilford. He said he would
No.
take a look at them.
I have not heard from him.
So he might or might not. If he doesn't, the report will say we asked for feedback and we didn't get it yet. At the time we were writing the report, we can just put that sentence in.
Mhm.
So we have that, and then we have whatever out year discussion we want to have. And then what if there's extra money? So I mentioned the one thing on the 6th grade move. If there's money, you know, and if we lower this enough, there may be money that we can just do directly here. And Shannon said she'd feel more comfortable with, and I'm not checking my notes whether she said 500, you know,
think
but
you-
it was,
I think
know,
you said an extra 100,000.
Yeah, I think she said 450, like
Yeah,
an
so
extra
that you would be
$100,000
comfortable-
her exact words, I
so
think.
Bob, so an extra 100. So if going to 450 would make her more comfortable. So I would suggest those would be potential areas to focus, and what anyone wants to raise on any of the others is fine. And I will be able to view Zoom after you all talk. So Nat?
Oh, just a procedural question. Who will be reviewing my minutes?
I fly out on
Oh.
Monday at 7:00 at night. If you get me the minutes by Sunday night, I will review and complete them. If not, I'll let Sarah do that. And I will do Bob's, which I already have, if Bridget gets me his. And what I've basically done is every once in a while there's formatting. And if I thought there was a discussion we didn't capture, so we have the Zoom to look at, or we have our own notes. So this is trying to capture. And I can send you, if you don't have it, Nat, a Word document of an earlier one that already has all of our names in it.
Yep, no, I have all that.
Okay, so that.
Kathy, could you send me that one? Because I know you had said there was a format and then I didn't find it.
Okay, so it's literally, I'll send you the Sarah one that was in Word, you know, just on because it just sets up to follow the agenda, Bridget, and then
Great.
you don't have to retype all of our names, which
Thank
always
you.
risks that you'll misspell somebody's name, or I always misspell somebody's name. So I think it's 6:00, amazingly. We did an amazing amount. We did amazing amount of discussion in the last 45 minutes, I must say.
Mhm.
So then the following week, when I'm back, we might be at the point where we're actually putting the report together. If you can get fairly far on reaching agreements, I'm unlikely to disagree with any cut. You know,
Well, I assume that I should continue to edit the report after next week's meeting for you.
Yeah,
to
you should. And what you'll see is, you know, unlike previous years, which made it easy, as we went along, there was enough time to get feedback from the town manager and staff, and if there was agreement to change something. But some of these things, I don't think we're going to get agreement on. So we're going to just have to say, some things changed.
Our recommendation, yep.
And then here's our recommendation of additional changes we'd like to see, you know, so that we like all the projects with these 5 exceptions or whatever,
Yeah.
however we want to do it. So that's a section that we've never written before. We could always just say, thank you for making all the changes as we went along. So
I need to go. Maybe
Yeah,
Bridget
so this
also.
is
We
it.
have
So
school
is-
committee. and-
is everyone good with adjourning and just raise their hands? We voted to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.